especialmente con las iglesias particulares. Y me he dado cuenta que la colaboración con cada uno de estos dicasterios y de las iglesias particulares, sobre todo en estos últimos 3 años, cuando se promulgó Predicate Evangelium y cuando fue más claro nuestro mandato en el número 78, pues ha sido, digamos, más significativo la escucha y la colaboración entre todos los dicasterios y la Comisión Pontificia. De hecho, uno de los puntos que, digamos, quisiera resaltar son los compromisos de colaboración escritos que hemos realizado con algunos dicasterios. Es el caso de Propaganda Fide, el dicasterio del clero, el dicasterio de los institutos de vida consagrada y las sociedades de vida apostólica, y los diferentes diálogos y conversaciones que hemos comenzado a tener en cada una de las conferencias episcopales que nos han invitado, unas y otros que nosotros nos hemos autoinvitado, porque nos damos cuenta que era necesario insistir en algunos puntos, especialmente de sus políticas de prevención. Así, con Monseñor Tibo comenzamos un viaje por África visitando la Conferencia Episcopal de Costa de Marfil y la República Centroafricana. Fui a visitar la Conferencia Episcopal belga y no solamente me encontré con ellos, sino también con los encargados de políticas de prevención y el grupo de víctimas que se encontró con el Papa Francisco el año pasado en su capital, en Bruselas. Y pues esta visita constante a las iglesias particulares es una de las propuestas que hace ya parte de nuestro trabajo en la Comisión Pontificia. Pasado mañana viajo a Filipinas, en una semana estaré en México, luego visitando algunas conferencias episcopales de Europa como Malta y Eslovenia, y de esta manera pues se expresa lo que es propiamente el reporte anual, un punto de inicio para después comenzar a dialogar con cada una de las iglesias particulares sobre los hallazgos y las observaciones que hemos detallado en estos informes. Por último, quisiera resaltar el apoyo incondicional que hemos sentido del Papa León en toda esta propuesta. Creo que es el mismo compromiso que sentimos del Papa Francisco, ciertamente con un estilo diverso, su estilo personal, me atrevería a decirlo que es más analítico, pero igualmente empático, pero de igual manera muy comprometido con toda el compromiso que nosotros tenemos como Comisión Pontificia de escuchar a las víctimas y que estén en el centro de nuestras prioridades. Muchas gracias.
Grazie a lei, Monsignora Lee, lieto delle sue parole e anche che lei abbia dato voce al lavoro decennale della Commissione, della crescita in questi anni della collaborazione con gli organismi La Curia. Poi lei parlava appunto del lavoro fatto con le conferenze episcopali. E darei ora la parola al professor Benyam Dawit Mesmour, membro della Pontificia Commissione per la tutela dei minori, per le sue parole e per qualche dettaglio in più anche sul piano metodologico nella costruzione e redazione del rapporto. Please, to you the floor.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here. Let me briefly introduce myself, given the fact that I'm not a common face and I don't live in the city here. Binyam is my name. I am Ethiopian. I'm based in South Africa. I have had the privilege to work with the African Union for 11 years. I currently serve on the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child for the last 13 years, even though I'm not here in that capacity. When the Holy Father, the late Holy Father Pope Francis appointed me, I don't think it was just only based on some of these credentials. I do genuinely believe that it's partly because of what I do on the ground. You don't always find me wearing a nice tie and a suit. I have the privilege to also spend quite a bit of time on the ground, rolling up my sleeves, and having that conversation at the grassroots levels. Now, I am quite keen to make 3 points. The first one is about the importance of addressing the data gap. Obviously, the data gap impedes significantly the progress that we want to make. If you really want to make progress, if you really want to understand whether you're moving forward or backward, you need to have that database. Where the data is available, we know for a fact that there are tremendous insights that come from that. First of all, it enables us to increasingly understand the kind of interventions that we need to make. What is working? What is not working? Who's accountable? What are the trends? What are the progresses? What are the shortcomings? Who are actually the main role players? You get quite a lot of that when you have the data present. It was just only last year that UNICEF actually published, exactly a year ago, UNICEF published a report about the global trends and prevalence on sexual abuse. For an organization as huge, as effective, as efficient as UNICEF, they haven't actually had the opportunity to do that before. Even when you look at that report that they did last year, it underscores the challenge that we face in terms of underinvestment. Data collection is not a walk in the park. In fact, disaggregated data collection is a significant task. So underinvestment is obviously one of the challenges that we face when we talk about data. In the current environment that we operate within, the funding cuts that we're experiencing in different parts of the world inevitably undermines the data collection infrastructure, the data analysis infrastructure. Now, I don't want to send a message here that says only when the data is there and when it's huge and the numbers are shocking that we actually jump into action. That's not the intention here. In fact, one expression that I like from UNHCR is the one that says, one refugee without hope is too many. If I was to adapt that, I would say, one child victim without hope, without reparation, without someone to listen to them, someone to believe them, someone to actually hold their hands and provide them the necessary services, is too many. But when you have the data in front of you, it helps with resource allocation. You should have a differentiation between boys and girls, contact sexual abuse and non-contact violence. You also get the opportunity to differentiate between whether you're collecting data on the low-hanging fruits or you're also trying to address those that are not low-hanging fruits, that are difficult but absolutely critical to make progress in terms of sexual abuse cases and the safeguarding interventions. The second point that I just want to mention is the value of the CRC committee's data in this annual report. It's a first step. The Committee on the Rights of the Child looks at the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 196 states. It's global, it's periodic, it's an independent body, and the reporting cycle to the Committee on the Rights of the Child is not just only by national governments. It involves civil society organizations, national human rights institutions, UN agencies, even labor unions and religious organizations at the grassroots levels. Not everything that you get as a data is accurate. One of the things that we benefit from the CRC committee's engagement is where the data is contested and challenged, then it's possible to triangulate and differentiate between fact from fiction. So from that point of view as well, the importance of that data from the CRC committee is important. If you look at the concluding observations that are given to states by the CRC committee, there is a lot of reference to local churches. And that information, again, helps to boost the information base that we have here. In fact, we're meeting at a very opportune time. It's the 35th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We should ask ourselves, is a child born today better off protection and rights than a child born 35 years ago? The answer is yes, but not every child. And it becomes absolutely important to identify that category of not every child to make sure that we create a world that is fit for children. The engagement with the CRC committee's data also helps us to get these conversations closer to UNICEF. I've already described UNICEF earlier as the largest, most efficient, having presence at the grassroots levels. And they are also involved in quite a number of these engagements, and making this annual report closer to the CRC committee's data also means getting it closer to the UNICEF engagements. The third and final point, in less than a minute, the importance of enculturation in conversional justice. What does it actually mean for the local realities? What does it? It's not just only enculturation, it's also vernacularization. Not everybody speaks English, not everybody speaks French. What do this means? What do these conversional justice issues mean for the layman on the street, at the grassroots levels, in the villages? not in the very nice air-conditioned rooms like this, but in the villages where you don't have a conversation about you don't have a conversation about the internet because there is no electricity. So it's important to adapt those issues at the local, at the grassroots levels. Conversional justice is obviously a set of concepts that must be adapted and responsive to local context, but this again doesn't mean that culture will be used as a tool to abuse. The way I view it, culture is like an umbrella. You take it out when it helps you to push the boundaries for the realization of children's rights, when it helps to protect children, but you don't actually put it out when it's going to be used for violating rights. Let me stop here, and I look forward to the conversations.
Thank you, Binyam. Thank you, Professor, for your words. Thank you for mentioning again the issue of conversional justice, its importance, and also the importance to understand it at every level. And thank you also for noting how the report has brought together and the opportunity to seek new allies at different levels in order to reach those data that you were mentioning, but also, of course, the alliance with the victims, all in the view of what Mrs. Maud de Bour-Bokicchio was mentioning as a culture of care. Now, perhaps the time has come to listen to the questions on part of the journalists who are present here and whom I thank for their presence. Cominciamo dalla domanda di Carol Glatz e poi Jacopo Scaramuzzi.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Carol Glatz with Catholic News Service. I have a question about one of the observations you made in the report about the importance of publicly communicating the reasons for resignation and or removal when it's related to cases of abuse and negligence. How do you see, or what have you recommended at all to the Vatican, especially the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith and the Vatican Press Hall, how they can better inform journalists when they receive bulletins about the resignation of a bishop? We currently receive no details about the reasons for someone stepping down. Have you made any recommendations in this regard? And what would you like to see?
Carol, is your question addressed to someone in particular? Or okay, then perhaps I would ask Bruce, the Secretary, if there is. Ladies first.
Ese es el problema de ser el secretario, que es el primero que le preguntan. Bien.
Por esto le invitamos.
Gracias. Gracias por la pregunta, porque me hace responder sobre todo en el trabajo que nosotros estamos haciendo en la Comisión Pontificia de diálogo permanente con los dicasterios, y entre esos, pues el diálogo permanente que hemos sostenido, porque hacemos parte de él, del dicasterio de la doctrina de la fe, sobre todo con el secretario de la sección disciplinar. En nuestras marco universal de las líneas guías, insistimos que hay principios, digamos, no negociables. Bueno, este marco universal, pues estamos en es un marco piloto, todavía no es el definitivo, lo estamos trabajando. Esperamos que dentro de pocos meses se pueda presentar el definitivo, pero el que ustedes ven en el sitio web aparece unos principios entre los cuales está el principio de ambientes seguros y el principio del manejo del personal. En él, en los criterios que desarrollamos y en los principios que desarrollamos, nosotros insistimos en ese manejo de todas estas sacerdotes o clérigos que han sido denunciados y la manera como tienen que ser manejados cada uno de sus procesos. E insistimos precisamente que uno de los principios fundamentales es la prevención y además el cuidar los ambientes para que sean seguros, para que protejamos a nuestros niños, niñas, adolescentes y personas vulnerables. En ese sentido estamos en una constante y permanente conversación con los dicasterios involucrados en todos estos procesos, no solamente en el dicasterio de la doctrina de la fe, sino también en el del clero y en este momento el de las asociaciones, el de las comunidades religiosas que acabamos de firmar ese compromiso de colaboración mutua.
Gracias, Monsignor Ali. La parola.
Well, I thank Monsignor Ali for this reply. If I just could add one additional consideration, this is really a high-level recommendation, as you see it now in our second annual report, is actually the follow-up of last year's annual report, and the dialogue to which Monsignor Ali referred is exactly that. It's about implementing our recommendations in our first annual report. And I think it is important also to bear in mind that that kind of information sharing, which is obviously related to transparency, which is the prominent need of every single victim and survivor, is that it must relate to the local sensitivity, local cultural context, and therefore it is important that the local church is capable of assuming this responsibility of sharing this highly important information. And our study on reparation, which is the focus of this annual report, demonstrates this further. We hope to use our annual report precisely to continue these critical conversations across the Roman Curia.
Grazie, Maud. Poi c'è tutto il discorso, mi sembra che si accenna a questo in vari punti del rapporto, anche del dialogo a livello locale, con le autorità civili, evidentemente, perché l'obiettivo è la protezione, come sottolineava anche Monsignor Ali. Forse Beniam voleva aggiungere qualcosa?
Thank you very much. Just to reinforce the points that were raised by my two colleagues, and I'll be very brief. When we talk about conversional justice, we're talking about truth, justice, reparations, and institutional reform. And even if we single reparations, for example, you want to do an apology as part and parcel of reparations. The level of transparency that is being asked here becomes absolutely critical to provide that apology. As part of reparations, you might be interested in doing rehabilitation. As part and parcel of rehabilitation, this transparency about the reason the person is being removed and so forth becomes critical. We obviously don't want to give presumption of innocence and the right to privacy unnecessary position in these conversations. They have their own role to play, but that role needs to be managed very, very carefully to make sure that we're not doing it at the cost of victims. So I thought I would mention the point that reparations, definitely particularly apologies, rehabilitation, even financial compensation, require that level of transparency, of course without undermining the right to privacy and presumption of innocence.
Thank you, Professor. C'era Jacopo Scaramuzzi.
Jacopo Scaramuzzi, Repubblica. Une question pour Monseigneur Président. Dans le rapport, vous écrivez que la Commission relève une remarquable résistance culturelle en Italie face aux abus. Je voudrais vous demander comment vous avez relevé cette résistance, si vous pouvez faire des exemples, et pourquoi, à votre avis, y a-t-il cette résistance? Merci.
Je vous remercie pour votre question qui met en avant, en lumière, le but du rapport annuel qui veut être un instrument, un outil plus exactement, pour mettre en mouvement, pour mettre en dialogue et pour stimuler. Donc vraiment, le rapport annuel est un instrument au service de tous pour avancer. Il est le travail de toute une équipe qui a, vous avez pu en faire le constat à travers le rapport annuel que vous avez, qui est un travail approfondi, long, et pour être plus précis, pour vous donner des réponses plus précises, je passerai la parole au secrétaire ou à Maud pour les données plus précises concernant la situation en Italie, qui est une situation, j'ai découvert, qui est très, très vaste de par le nombre de diocèses impliqués.
Ricordiamo chiaramente che il rapporto riguarda il periodo precedente, quindi evidentemente...
De mi parte puedo, digamos, responder lo siguiente. Gracias por la pregunta sobre la situación de la Conferencia Episcopal Italiana, porque es uno de los trabajos que me he comprometido en este año y medio, conocer más la realidad de la Conferencia Episcopal Italiana, que por supuesto debo reconocer que no conocía, y estoy en permanente y constante estudio y análisis. Y uno de los puntos pues, que puedo constatar es el trabajo que se ha realizado de un sistema a muchos niveles de protección, de un sistema operativo de protección. Esto lo he constatado, pero también lo he visto en el trabajo de la doctora Griffini, que es la encargada en la Conferencia Episcopal Italiana de todas estas políticas de prevención. También pues he constatado que ha habido un crecimiento significativo de la formación en estos últimos años, y pues también este proyecto que están haciendo, que es del 2024 al 2029 del Servicio Nacional de Tutela de Menores y de los Adultos Vulnerables. Hay muchos elementos que me impresiona el trabajo tan serio que está haciendo la Conferencia Episcopal, especialmente pues la Oficina de Protección de Menores, también liderada por Monseñor Batturi. Pero reconocemos también algunos puntos que los presentamos precisamente en el informe anual. Es decir, ya cuando analizamos las 18 regiones de la Conferencia Episcopal Italiana, constatamos que en los servicios locales es necesario más una estabilización y una profesionalización de estas oficinas, de esta atención. Creo que es necesario sobre todo promover un diálogo estructurado con las víctimas y con los sobrevivientes. Esto no pasa solo en Italia, es un grito de las víctimas. No se sienten escuchadas, no se sienten acompañadas. A veces las relaciones no son empáticas o diría respetuosas, y se percibe entonces también en algunas de estas regiones que es necesario promover un diálogo más estructurado con las víctimas y sobrevivientes. De igual manera, pues reforzar la colaboración con la autoridad civil y académica, y también un fenómeno pues que vuelvo a repetir, no solamente lo vemos en Italia, yo que vengo de Latinoamérica también lo he constatado en muchos de mis contextos, una resistencia cultural en la Iglesia, pero también en la cultura propia de afrontar estas situaciones sin pelos en la lengua, o sea, con toda con la seriedad que se necesita hacer. Y también hemos visto, digamos, una cierta fatiga. Esto es uno de los términos que usamos muchas veces en la comisión, una fatiga a la misma prevención. Es decir, digamos, algunas instituciones comienzan como muy animadas, entusiasmadas a hacer políticas y trabajos de prevención, y luego como que se va disminuyendo ese entusiasmo. Vemos esa fatiga también. Eso es lo que podría aportar desde mi observación y el tratar de conocer cada vez más la realidad italiana.
Grazie, Monsignor Ali. Prego.
I wouldn't have anything to add to the very extensive presentation by Monsignor Ali, except for one thing that I think it is. There are two things actually which I want to add. First of all, this is also very clear. This cultural resistance, as it is framed, has become very clear when we listen to the victims in the focus groups of the regional focus groups which relate to Europe. We heard this exactly from the victims. So that's one thing. But I do want to highlight also this lack of empathy which Monsignor Ali has diagnosed. The CEI, the Italian Bishops' Conference, is aware of this, and it's precisely that which it wishes to reduce by providing training, because it requires skills, and these skills are not necessarily natural skills; they have to be learned, and this is something which the CEI is definitely aware of and making major efforts in its training, which it wants to spread all over the Italian territory, because there's a difference between certain regions, and it should be a common capacity to deal with and to address victims.
Grazie. Nicole Winfield.
Ciao, Nicole Winfield from Associated Press. I have two quick questions. One is a follow-up to Carol's question. I think what she was referring to is that in the past, and fairly recent past, at the very least, we used to be told the canonical reasons why a bishop retired, 401(1) or 401(2), either for age or some other grave reasons. I think the question would be, why can't the Holy See at the very least return to that practice to provide a little bit of transparency about why a bishop might have been removed for negligence, if not provide other information. So if you want to refer to that. But my question concerns propaganda fide. I wonder, it seems like there's a pretty big red flag in your findings, which is that only a small number of cases had apparently been reported to propaganda fide, and only 2 bishops had been sanctioned for negligence under Vos Estis, which seems really alarming considering the vast territory that propaganda fide covers, all of Asia, Africa, parts of the Middle East, Oceania. It tells me that even the basic following of canonical law is not being followed there, which I would think would be really a red flag. And I just wonder if I'm reading that correctly.
Bien. Bien, yo quisiera responder a la primera pregunta y le doy, si quiere, la doctora Mott, responder la primera parte de esta segunda pregunta. Quiero insistir que eso está en el Código de Derecho Canónico, ¿sí? Es decir, está presente y fue uno de los temas, una de las observaciones precisamente que le presentamos al Santo Padre, precisamente este tema que usted plantea. Y pues él tomó nota y vemos que está muy interesado en proponer, digamos, algunos análisis y estudios al respecto. Quisiera responder ese punto de esa manera.
C'è qualcosa che vuoi cominciare a dire anche sul secondo punto, Monsignor Ali, oppure lo passo per modo? Va bene.
Well, we don't treat specific cases, as you know, so we cannot comment on those 2 cases which you have just mentioned. But on the other hand, the Commission in its first pilot annual report discussed the need to ensure a strong and clear application of Vos Estis. And our work with, in particular with Section 3 of the second annual report, which works on this particular question further. And again, the recommendation to provide information, all has to do with transparency and creating trust and confidence in the Church. And through that, through creating this transparency, trust will return. And there will be the hindrance and the hesitation to turn even to a church authority to denounce abuse will become much easier if you have the impression you can talk to somebody whom you can trust. So it's part of the whole complete and integrated approach to safeguarding. Thank you.
Bene. Prego, Eccellenza.
Je me permets de rajouter, d'abord vous remercier pour cette question qui met en lumière deux aspects aussi qui ressortent du rapport annuel. Tout d'abord, on est encore plus sensibilisé à l'importance de la communication et à la souffrance provoquée par la non-communication. Et ça, ce sont les personnes victimes qui nous le rappellent. Et puis le deuxième point, c'est que le rapport annuel, comme je vous l'ai dit, est un outil de cheminement avec non seulement les conférences épiscopales, mais qui ne sont pas toutes analogues de par leur culture. Et donc, il s'agit de cheminer ensemble avec résolution. J'allais dire, je préfère le terme résolution, détermination, en quelque sorte.
Not necessarily answering your question, but responding, because underreporting was one of the points that has been flagged. I come from that part of the world where we often hear there are no cases. I cringe, because I know for a fact that there are cases. But we need to look deeper and see why are they not being reported? Are the structures in place? Are there issues about reprisals? Are there issues that we need to address about power relations? Those conversations are absolutely critical, and the recommendations that you find here, the overarching recommendations, but also the detailed conversations in this document point in that direction. Now, I do genuinely believe that the best way of getting these reports partly is through mandatory reporting requirements, not recommendations, but legal requirements, making sure that they are enforced, but equally importantly, empowering children plays a very critical role. The Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted without child participation. But we know for a fact that what is keeping it alive, what is keeping it relevant for the lived reality of children's lives in its 35 years is because of children's voices. So it's not just only in the climate change conversation or within disability that we say nothing about us without us. So the more children are informed about this, the more the information is accessible to them, the more families empower them, the more the education system empowers them. Then we get to hear about these things. So underreporting remains to be a very big challenge, and quite a number of these recommendations that are contained in here actually indicate a sense of urgency why we need to pass that hurdle.
Which would be the reason why a report is published. Monsignor Ali.
Gracias. Solo quisiera insistir en lo siguiente. Estamos muy conscientes de esto, de los datos que aparecen especialmente en África y en Asia, y es la razón por la que uno de los pilares, uno de los trabajos fundamentales que está haciendo la Comisión Pontificia es lo que nosotros llamamos la iniciativa Memorare. Cuando hablamos con los obispos, sobre todo de algunos países de Asia y de África, nos damos cuenta de la falta de recursos. Y no me refiero solo a los recursos económicos, sino también a los recursos humanos, a los profesionales. Y la razón por la que insistimos, digamos, en esta iniciativa Memorare es para poder ayudar a estas regiones a sus estructuras de recepción de denuncias, en sus proyectos de prevención, en sus protocolos de protección de niños, niñas, adolescentes y personas vulnerables. La comisión comenzó hace año y medio con un Memorare, ahora tenemos 21, y en África nuestro proyecto es ampliar el próximo año cada vez más. Por ser un continente tan amplio, estamos privilegiando el trabajo por las regiones, es decir, tenemos un trabajo muy directo en este momento con AMESEA, con algunos países específicos también, por supuesto, pero digamos que iniciamos con un trabajo con las regiones africanas.
Thank you very much. Hendro Menseman, Nederlands Dagblad. Two questions, if I may. In the report, I read that some bishops expressed the concern that the definition of vulnerable adult remains very nebulous. Did the report, did you investigate only on abuse of minors, or was also the abuse of vulnerable adults included in your investigation? And how do you define today what a vulnerable adult is? First question. Second question is about cultural change. There was already some discussion about cultural obstacles for victims to denounce the abuse that they suffered. One of the cultural obstacles, when I read the report, is about sexuality, and you even asked the bishops from Gabon to invest in sexual education. The church until now has been very often and for a long time one of the promoters of this taboo. How to deal with this taboo on homosexuality, but also on sexuality in general? What do we have to understand from these phrases and these paragraphs in the report? Thank you.
Sí, quisiera responder al tema de los adultos vulnerables. Sí, la respuesta directa a su interesante pregunta es sí, nos referimos a los adultos. Porque, digamos, si vemos el Código de Derecho Canónico, cuando hablamos en este sentido, pues solo nos referimos al Canon 99, al uso imperfecto de razón. Pero en la vida ordinaria nos hemos dado cuenta que muchas víctimas están en situaciones de vulnerabilidad y muchos adultos están en situaciones de vulnerabilidad. Por eso, para nosotros es muy importante ampliar el estudio y el análisis de toda esta situación que está aconteciendo en muchos contextos de la Iglesia, pero también en muchas realidades de adultos. Es la razón por la que la Comisión Pontificia tiene un grupo de estudio sobre la vulnerabilidad. Estamos trabajando, los miembros expertos en esta temática que invitaron también a pues, expertos canonistas y de otras materias interdisciplinares, esperan, desean, digamos, presentar sus conclusiones el próximo año, pero en eso estamos trabajando porque nos damos cuenta que el tema está muy, muy presente y pues obviamente que también es una de las temáticas urgentes para nosotros.
Gracias.
Dejo a otros de mis compañeros a responder las otras preguntas.
Forse chiederei a Maud se può rispondere alla seconda parte della...
So the question concerning sexual education, it's true it is only a specific recommendation in the context of Gabon, but it's obvious that this is at the very heart of allowing victims to defend themselves and to not only to prevent this sexual assault to occur, but also after, unfortunately, having